Hello and welcome to this video on how to tackle the ABRSM Grade 8 Trio Sonata question. My name is Victoria Williams. I'm the author of the website mymusictheory.com, and I have a complete course which explains in great detail how to do this question. This video is a walkthrough which is a culmination of the things that I teach in that video course. So if you'd like to come and see that course, I've dropped the link below in the description. Don't forget to subscribe, and here we go. In this Trio Sonata question, I'm going to work through it with you so you can see the steps which I've suggested that you take and how that works in practice. The first thing to do is always to look at the key signature and think about what key the music's in. We've got a key signature of 1 sharp and the opening chord is E minor, so this is going to be in E minor. The next thing I'll do is, working from the beginning to the end of the extract, I'm just going to be focusing really on the dissonances, and I'm going to try and write in the dissonant note, its preparation note and its resolution into the correct part if I can work out which one it is, and if I can't work out which one it is, then I'm going to put it just as a note above the bass line. So the first dissonant chord is the 6/5 in bar 1, but that one's already been completed in the printed part. So moving into bar 2, I'm going to look at the figure 9 above the bass note A. So we're thinking about the dissonant note, which is B, and we already have a B in the top part, so that 9 is in place. However, the 8, the resolution, isn't in place. So that's the first thing that I can pencil in. And I can probably be sure that it's a crotchet or quarter note because there's only one beat left in the bar. In bar 3 I have a 6/5, so the chord is B7, and that means that the 7th is the note A, and that needs to be prepared and resolved. I know where to write this because I already have the preparation note A in the top part, so the A, which is the 7th in this chord, goes into the same part, and I'm going to tie that over because usually when a dissonance is prepared over a bar line, it's a tied note. A resolves to G, and the G is already written for me, so I don't need to worry about that. At the end of the bar, there's a 7 over a bass note C, and the 7th is going to be a B. So which part should I write this into? Remembering that I need to have a preparation note B as well, I can only write this into the middle part because there's no space to write the B into the top part. So I'll put the B in above the C. I'm also going to put one in above the E on the chord before, and that's my preparation note. So B is the 7th, and this needs to resolve down by step to A. So we do need to check that this is going to work in the chord. So looking at the chord, the bass note is C, the figure is 6, so that's an A minor chord. So using an A is absolutely fine, so I can pop the A in as well. Moving into the 4th bar, I've got another 7th, this time it's B7. So A is the 7th, and just written an A in the middle part, so that was my preparation in bar 3. The dissonance is in bar 4, and it resolves down to a G on the 2nd beat of the bar. Another 7th at the end of the bar, so we have a C major 7 chord. So this one is going to be a B, and I already have a B in the top part this time. So B is already prepared, needs to resolve down to A, which is the 4th beat of the bar in the top part. Bar 5 doesn't have any dissonances, so I'll just leave that for the moment. In bar 6 I have another 6/5, so this one is A7. The 7th is going to be G. So is it possible for me to work out where to write this? Well, looking closely, I can see that the middle part has a rest which covers the first 2 beats. So I can't write the G into the middle part. That rest has to be taken into account. So the G must go into the top part, and since I need to also prepare it, let me double check that the G is in the first chord in the bar, so that will be a chord of G major in first inversion, so that's fine. So this is going to be a note which lasts for 2 beats, so I might as well write it in as a minim or half note. And in doing that, I've immediately spotted that the 2 notes that I've written here, a leap of a 6th, which is quite an unusual interval, is actually something of a theme that's going on here, because the first bar had a leap of a 6th, and also bar 4 has a leap of a 6th. So this is something which I need to keep in the back of my mind as a useful interval which might crop up again. So we were still working on the 6/5 chord, so the G is the 7th and that needs to resolve down by step to F sharp. Just double check that chord is D, D major, so F sharp is in that chord, so that works fine, and I can write F sharp into the top part. In bar 7 I have a 9/8, so the bass note is E, a ninth above that is F sharp, so that's going to go into the same part that I've just written F sharp in the previous bar. So the previous bar was the preparation, F sharp is the dissonance, and E, a step down, is going to be the resolution note there. Another 6/5 on an A sharp. So the chord here is F sharp 7, and obviously we're modulating, so F sharp 7 is the dominant 7th in B minor. So in this case the 7th is E. I've already got an E in the top part, so that was my preparation. Another E will be the 7th, and in fact writing a minim or half note is a better notation, so we'll put a minim in there. And the E needs to resolve down by step to D in the B minor chord on the 4th beat of the bar. We then have a 7/6 suspension. So remember, this means a first inversion chord. So G, the bass note, is the 3rd of the chord is E minor, and I'm going to suspend the 7th above G, which is F sharp. So I don't have an F sharp already in the top part. I have nothing written into the middle part, so this seems to be the place where I'm going to need to put my preparation F sharp. So I'm going to put in the F sharp first in the middle part, and then I'm going to write another one in the previous chord as my preparation. That was a B minor chord, remember, so F sharp is going to be fine. Let me just tie that over. F sharp is going to resolve by step to E on the 2nd beat of the bar. And we then have another F sharp 7 chord. So the E that I've just written was a resolution note, but it's also functioning as a preparation note for the next 7th. Another E goes in, so we can actually write a minim or half note. And the 7th again resolves to D on the 4th beat of the bar, which is B minor. In the final bar here, I have a 7 above a G, but remember, because this is a 7/6 suspension, we're looking at a first inversion chord of E minor again. So F sharp will be the 7th, and I don't have a place to prepare that in the middle part, so I'll pop it into the top. There's the dissonance, the preparation will go into the 4th beat of the previous bar, and tie it over, resolves down to E on the 2nd beat of the bar. So all of my dissonances and the preparation and resolution notes have been put in, and we have still some gaps. So we need to go back to the beginning and try and work out what else we can do. At the beginning, the middle part starts off with several rests. So what we're looking at here is a staggered opening where one of the upper part instruments begins and then the second instrument follows a little bit later. And as you know, most of the time when this happens, we're looking for a sequence or imitation of some kind. So let's start off by seeing if we can just reuse the same notes that were there in bar 1 of the top part, which was an E and a C. So looking at the 2nd beat of the bar in bar 2, it's a G sharp with a 6, so it's a first inversion, so that's a chord of E major. And so of course I can write an E, and that actually is the note that's missing from the triad so far. So that would be a great choice, even if it wasn't a sequence. And now I'm looking to write a C. My chord is A minor, and I already have in place the root, which is A, and I have a suspension in the top part, so I can carry on in the middle part with the 3rd, which is C, and that gives me a nice imitative opening. The next note in the top part was B, so let's see if that one works. In bar 3, the chord is B7, so perfect, we can have our B. And now I can see that I've got 3 Bs in a row, so I can combine these into one long note, which will then actually match bar 2 of the upper part, which is a dotted minim. So I've now started off my middle part, and so far I've got as far as the A, which is tied in the upper part, and I know that this is going to continue with an A in the middle part, so I'll tie that over as well. And then just copying over again the top part, I've got 2 quavers or 8th notes, G and F sharp. which I can see will fit there with the bass, because these two notes are moving in thirds, E and G, and then D and F sharp. And I can move down to E, which is the third of my C major 7 chord. And now that I know what comes after the F sharp, I can actually go back to bar 3 and put the E in there as well. Bar 5, if you just look carefully at that bass line, so we've just got 2 Bs and they're both reasonably long notes, so this is looking like a cadence end of a phrase here. And also at one point in the middle of the bar here, both of the upper parts have got rests, so that's another clue that we're looking at a cadence. When we're at a cadence, we need parts to move smoothly as possible by step. This is a B major cadence, so we're going to go to D sharp in the middle part, because E to D sharp is just a semitone step. And there in the top part, we would want to go to a B, because A to B is the smallest distance we can move. So although we're missing the F sharp, or the 5th of the triad, we don't want to move to an F sharp there, because that would mean that this part would need to move by a third. In this style, it's always the smallest interval at a cadence. So moving on from the end of bar 5, after this rest, the top part then begins again with a similar idea as at the beginning. So let's assume that something similar is going to happen in the middle part as well. So this little idea starts on the weak part of the bar. It starts on the 4th beat of the bar. So to achieve the same in the middle part, we would need another rest on the 3rd beat of the bar. It's usually not advisable to write a lot of rests into your answer, because they're really looking for notes, but occasionally there will be times when rhythmically a rest would be the best solution. Now that I've done that, I can see if I can continue the middle part in imitation in the same way as it was at the beginning. So this would mean trying to fit in a B followed by a G on the strong beat and then an F sharp. So let's try the B first of all. We've got the first inversion chord, so it's B major, so B is going to be fine. Rising up to a possible G, so we're going to an E minor chord, so G is looking good, and also we're missing that G, so we want to make sure we're not doubling things that shouldn't be doubled. G is a minimal half note, and this is moving down to F sharp, and that's in our F sharp 7 chord, which is so far missing a root, so that looks like the sensible solution. And now I can see I've got 2 crotchets, 2 quarter notes here. So we're going to combine those into a minim or half note, keep the tie. So tied notes are fine as long as you're tying a longer note to a shorter note or tying 2 notes of the same value. And I can now see as well that actually the F sharp in the top part in bar 6 also should ideally be a minim or half note tied over, because this then will match the imitation, and we don't need anything else in that bar on the top part. That completes those bars. So into bar 8, the first chord there is an E minor chord. We've got the 3rd in the bass, which is G. We have the suspension, obviously, but we need something else. So remember that in a 7/6 suspension, the resolution note is the root, so it's moving down to E, and we don't really want to have that root note in the chord on the 1st beat, or it's going to sound less effective as a suspension. So the missing note here is B. So I'm going to pop a B in, and then just look at how that joins up. So most of the time we would want to be moving either by step, because smooth movement is good, or if it's moving by leap, then there'll be a reason for that. So it could be, for example, following a pattern that's set up elsewhere. But if it's possible to fill in a gap with a passing note, then that's often the best solution. So in this case, I'm going to put in the missing note, which is actually going to be C sharp, because as I said earlier, we've actually modulated the F7 chord is B minor. So we need a C sharp because we're in B minor, even though that's not necessarily written in any of the figures there. So moving on now, we have the other half of the E minor chord. I don't think we necessarily need anything else in the top part. So on the 3rd beat of the bar, we're looking for something to complete the F sharp 7 chord. So far we've only got an F sharp and an E. So the best note to include here would probably be the A sharp, because that's moving by step from the B. It's also a nice note to include in your 7th chord. It's not always strictly necessary. But when I put it in, I can also see that I now have that lovely leap of a 6th, which we noticed was an important element earlier on. So bar 8 is done. Bar 9, again the bass notes are showing us that we're moving into a cadence. So here we're not looking for anything fast, and we are definitely going to move as smoothly as possible. The E minor chord, similar to the one before, we've got the G bass note, so the missing note here needs to be the B. And with a B coming from a D, I can add in that passing note of C sharp because it's B minor. And then the last chord of the bar is going to be F sharp major. So I'm going to put an A sharp in the middle part, that's the closest note, and an F sharp in the top part, that's the closest note. And that's the whole thing done.